Hey, what's going on? So, if you are installing a front derailleur and a mountain bike crank because you're going to somewhere like the Philippines or Thailand where there's really steep hills, you're gonna want some good gears so you're able to ride pretty comfortably. And so I just want to show what I did to get mines to work. So this is a SRAM rival. I believe I'm just going to count the gears. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's a 10-speed front derailleur. This bike, I bought it off someone else used. It had this front derailleur, but I put on this mountain bike crank and I put this cassette on and SRAM red rear derailleur. So I tried to get this thing to work and it was a bit tough. It wouldn't shift properly. But let me show you what I did here. So things I looked out for. First, I looked out for the height. So I'm not really gonna show you how to loosen the bolt, how to loosen this. I'll talk about it, but if you really want to see something like that, let me know in the comments and I'll make that video for you, and I'll mess up my front derailleur for you. But for now, I just finished setting this up, so I don't really want to mess with it. So there's a bunch of things that goes into here. So one is you have to make sure the spacing. Try to put the camera here, and we want to make sure the spacing of the chain rings works with the front derailleur, if that makes any sense. So I'll put an example here. So if this crank was further out, this derailleur only shifts or only moves a certain amount. So if this crank is further out, it's going to be harder to shift the chain to that second chain ring. Does that make sense? The chain has to travel way further. So what I did was I took out the spacers on this side of the bottom bracket and I put them all here. You can see the black. So this crank arm is further out, so it's a bit off, but I don't notice it when I'm riding. I moved all the spacers on this side, so now the crank is closer to the frame. So when I shift, you see it only has a certain amount of movement. The further this is out, this has to be able to move further, but it only moves a small amount. So I made sure this was as far in as I could get it. And then, so that's good. Next, so this is the front derailleur, right? This is the outer plate, and this is the inner plate on this side. The inner plate, outer plate. So the inner plate was slightly touching the chainstay. So I just made sure to bring the low limit screw in. So now I've got a nice gap here so that the inner plate isn't touching the chainstay. I think if I zoom in, you can see that the inner plate was kind of making a mark on the chainstay. So what I also had to make sure so that this part over here, the inner plate, doesn't rub against the chainstay, is that the outer plate is aligned with the chain ring. And so that also helps making sure that the inner plate doesn't mark the chainstay or hit it. It'll probably bang up against it a little bit depending on how much flex there is, but at least it's not going to be as bad. So the chain isn't rubbing the inner plate. So you can see here I'm on the first gear and the first gear here, and no rub. So for shifting, you know, it works. So I noticed the cable here is rubbing against this part of the frame. The cable is rubbing this part of the frame. I think I should be using some sort of plastic straw. So the plastic straw goes over the cable, so there's less friction. So I think I should probably do that. I just haven't gotten around to it. So you can see, so when I shift, right, I had to make sure the cable tension was right to make sure the derailleur moved out far enough. But I had to make sure I didn't pull too much cable, because the thing is, what happens is if you pull too much cable, so if I pull on this, right, it brings the derailleur out. If I put too much tension, then that inner plate is gonna rub on the chain even more. I also wanted to make sure I pulled enough tension that it shifts up, but not too much tension where that trim wouldn't work. So there's a lot of tension, and you can see the front derailleur only trims like a millimeter, but that millimeter is just enough for the chain to not rub on that inner plate. I'm gonna shift up. So I shifted into this gear. So now I'm cross chaining. So, how do you? So now I'm cross chaining. First gear, then second gear. You don't want to cross chain. That'll wear your chain out faster. But anyway, you can hear it's rubbing a little bit. So what's going on is the chain is rubbing the inner plate. And also, I made sure that, so I made sure the chain had some clearance between here, if I move the chain, and the upper part of the derailleur here. You can see it moves right there. So before it was rubbing right here, so I just brought the derailleur up a few millimeters. Yeah, this was mainly just me talking about how I got my setup to work. If this isn't really a how-to video, it's just me talking about how I got my bike to ride the way I wanted to. But there's a play in this crank. So if you move it laterally, if you move your crank laterally, there shouldn't be any play, but there's play. I can feel it. If I move it enough, you can kind of see it. Not really. Right here, I feel it. But you can't really see the movement. But anyway, I think the bottom bracket, yeah, is worn. I can feel it when I pedal. There's some grinding. So I'm going to replace that bottom bracket. And if you have any questions about how to set up your own bike, I can make a video showing you how to do that. If you want, you can find me on Instagram, find me on TikTok, send me a video of your bike, and I can guide you on how to get your bike to work using a bunch of terms, if you're interested. And if not, and you didn't like this video, you can let me know. Hey, I didn't understand what the heck you're saying. This was boring. I just appreciate the feedback so I can improve. Thanks.